Hello and welcome to this special episode of Political Theatre. I am Vishal Dahiya and today we will discuss the much talked about issue of simultaneous elections. One of the pillars of Indian democracy is the periodic organization of free and fair elections. The kind of electoral exercise that we witness in India is unparalleled in the world. Due to the sheer size of electorate and the expense of our democracy, this electoral exercise does not only assume gigantic proportions, it also leads to huge electoral expenditure. The Election Commission of India is busy throughout the year in conducting elections to the state assemblies or the parliament. One part or the other of our country is always in a poll mood. And this is the situation when we are not taking into account the local elections for panchayats and municipal corporations. The idea of simultaneous elections has spoken about for quite a few years. However, this idea acquired center stage recently with Prime Minister Narendra Modi himself pointing to the benefits of such an exercise. The Election Commission has also recently said it would be logistically equipped by September 2018 to hold simultaneous elections for Parliament and state assemblies. Centre government's policy think tank Niti Aayog has also favoured conducting synchronized two-phase elections from 2024. This, however, is easier said than done, as it would require a political consensus and amendments to the constitution. So can a simultaneous election be implemented, and what are the advantages and disadvantages of such an exercise? For a detailed discussion on this, today we have with us in the studio a distinguished panel of guests. Let me introduce you to them, starting with Mr. K.G. Suresh, the Director General of Indian Institute of Mass Communication. We also have with us Mr. Sanjay Kumar, the Director of CSDS, and we also have with us Chakshu Roy, the Head of Outreach of PRS Legislative Research. Welcome all of you to the studios. Before we begin the discussion, I would like all of you and our viewers also to have a look at how many elections we have had in the past 3 years. Almost 16 states have gone to elections in the past 3 years after the general elections. Let's take a look. Lok Sabha elections took place in March 2014. After that, the assembly elections started. Maharashtra and Haryana went to polls in September to October 2014. Then came the turn of Jharkhand and Jammu and Kashmir. The Delhi state went to election in January and February 2015. Bihar in September and November 2015. Assam, Kerala, Puducherry, Tamil Nadu, West Bengal went to polls. And after that, Punjab, Uttar Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Manipur, Goa went to poll between February and March 2017. So a total of 16 states which went to poll immediately after the parliamentary elections which took place in March. Mr. Suresh, how good is the idea of simultaneous elections?
Vishal, I remember talking to late Purno Sangma, and once I was discussing with him about the performance of a particular government, how he expected it to perform. And I remember him telling me that, if this government is not in an election mode, then certainly any government which is perennially in an election mode will not be able to deliver. Because if you have to look at a long-term plan, then governments are, because of the compulsions of elections, are unable to take major decisions. Of course, currently you have a government which has a lot of, you have a, very good majority in the House. But there are governments, fragile governments, which are coalition governments. Will they be able to take bold decisions, irrespective, unmindful, negating its impact on the Lok Sabha, on the Parliament or State Assembly elections? Will they be able to take it? So I think that from the governance point of view, absolutely there is no doubt that when you have a stable regime, when you know that for the next 5 years, I don't have to face the electorate, I will be able to take decisions with long-term implications, certainly it helps. It adds, I should also add here, the tremendous amount of money that's being spent, in one go, what you can achieve, that you will have to spend over the years, and for a developing country like ours, it's a big challenge. Third, I have some other points as well, but these are the basic fundamentals which I would like to respond to. Very importantly, we must not forget that the political party, it would reduce, in my view, political corruption to a great extent. A political party which has to spend money time and again will keep looking for, alternative sources of income. Once you know that you have to spend it only once in 5 years, and that too, this is the amount, certainly it would have an impact on the political corruption, if I may use that term. And last but not the least, yes, the deployment of security forces, the deployment of government employees, that all takes its toll.
Okay.
So I think that overall, if you look at it, certainly it has a lot of advantages and benefits.
Okay, it has a lot of merits, and you pointed out 4 or 5 of them. Let's take a look at them one by one. Let me bring in Mr. Sanjay Kumar from CSDS here, and let's begin with the governance point of view. We'll talk about the expenditure. We have some interesting figures also to share with our viewers. From the governance point of view, do you agree with the viewpoint which has been put forth by Mr. Suresh that this will definitely boost the governance part? The way the governments take decisions is something which will be affected if simultaneous elections are held?
See, I don't understand why, if there is an election in Karnataka state or XYZ some state, why everything would be put on hold on other states.
Okay.
So, yes, it has some implications. If the state goes to poll, yes, there would be months, maybe 3 or 4 months, when the government will not be in a position to take bold step, new decisions. But the government is elected for 5 full years. You have 4 years and 8 months, a neat 4 years and 8 months to deliver. I doubt if a government is not able to deliver in 4 months, 4 year, 8 months, the government would be able to deliver only in 4 months. So I don't buy this argument thoroughly, or to the extent that the government is unable to perform or government is unable to deliver only because there is all the time there is an election. Yes, it has some impact, but not to the extent as being mentioned.
Okay, so governance doesn't seem to be a very important point for Mr. Sanjay Kumar. Let me bring in Mr. Chakshu out here. Chakshu, the entire issue of governance and the impact it might have on decisions is pretty neatly and clearly related to the model code of conduct, which comes into force the moment the elections dates are announced by the Election Commission. Some experts also suggest that we can tweak the way the rules of model code of conduct are implemented. Is that possible, or is what Mr. Suresh is saying that is the moot point?
I think what Sanjay and Suresh are saying are very valid. But also what is valid is the fact as to that currently there's a reason for the model code of conduct to exist. And that reasoning is that governments which are in power should not by their actions be able to influence the electorate. However, that neat little perspective over the years has gotten more expanded in its view. I remember the other day I was checking the Election Commission website. A bank had written to the Election Commission saying that, oh, they were going to do this particular activity in a particular area, and did they have the Election Commission's permission? My understanding was that Election Commission's purview only extended to governmental activities. But here, because of either the fear or the respect of the Election Commission, a number of things are now being addressed to the Election Commission. Simultaneous elections, the feasibility of it, the plus and the minus, we can debate that. But the genesis of the problem starts with the fact as to how do you do fixed term legislatures. We are a country where the term of the legislature and the term of the government runs together. Many other countries, the term of the legislature is independent of the term of the government. So what we are really saying is, how do you get to fixed term legislatures? Now, fixed term legislatures, the idea should have started in 1985 when you said anti-defection law. The idea of anti-defection law was you're supposed to bring political stability, and when political stability comes, it is assuming that when a government comes into power, it will not go out of power till the constitutionally mandated time. Now, that hasn't happened.
Okay.
Right? So now we are talking about how do we do, simultaneous elections. So there are different ways to look at it. I mean, for me, if I had to, the Parliament has a wonderful report out. The Committee on Personal and Public Affairs took out a report which discussed this issue in detail. And what the report basically said is, and as you rightly pointed out in your opening remarks, Niti Aayog has also suggested you can possibly do it in 2 phases.
Okay.
But that still does not solve your problem, because after that is the first step towards doing it.
So the fixed term of legislature is what the biggest hindrance you're pointing out. Yeah. Let me bring in Mr. Suresh out. Mr. Suresh, is the answer to this problem lies in the German model, wherein as we have it, they have it in Germany out there, that if you bring in a no confidence motion, then you also have to bring in a confidence motion alongside that, and whosoever is bringing in no confidence motion should have the required numbers to form the alternate government.
That can be certainly one of the options, no doubt about it. But again, it depends on the political maturity. How political parties are going to respond to this suggestion at all? Are they going to outrightly reject it as it is coming? Because today there is so much of polarization, that I really am a little worried, in the sense that there used to be a time when, at least on, say, external affairs, on defense issues, you had some consensus. Today, political consensus has become totally elusive. You have to oppose everything. And I don't know, and this is not the trend right now. I've been seeing it over the past few years, which is certainly not very healthy for democracy. I think that at least they should have the maturity to sit across the table and discuss. I think that this is a wonderful idea for electoral reforms, and we need to go ahead, on the electoral reforms path. Because there is so much, I mean, I would await a time when we will have the right to recall, and all those things should come over a period of time. But then, what is the way out? So I think that we have to sit around instead of outrightly rejecting it, because these have their tangible benefits, and they have far-reaching implications on the governance also.
Okay.
You see, for example, I'll just give you an example. Say there are problems between two riparian states, whether it is between Haryana and Punjab or Tamil Nadu and Karnataka. Now, if there is election in either of the states, any political party would really, avoid taking a decision on that, because they have this fear that, look, we will be, thrown out, or we will be routed in the next election.
The reprisal from the voters.
So, yes. So, if you know that, yes, for 5 years, nothing can happen. So, a decision which is in the larger interests of both the states and also the overall, I mean, I'm just giving you an example. Right now, of course, they are both with the purview of the judiciary. But I'm just taking, I mean, these kind of interstate issues and all those issues, you always have a scope. Whereas if you are in a perennial election mode, there is always this fear that, oh, what would be the electoral outcome of that?
So
yes, that is why today, come to think of it, after 1975 emergency, since 1977, no one in this country is talking about population growth at all. No political party is talking about it.
Okay.
Only because of fear of a popular reprisal.
Okay. Let's now take a look at another point and some more figures with respect to the expenditure on elections. Elections in India are a costly affair. Conducting multiple elections every few months only raises the cost manifold. As the chart shows, the first ever election in India cost 10.45 crore, and the latest general elections in 2014 cost 3,426 crores, over 300 times that of the first general elections. There is a marked difference in election expenditure between 2009 and 2014 itself, from 1,115 crore in 2009 to 3,426 crore in 2014. The expenses have tripled from 2009 general elections to 2014. If you look at state elections also, then the cost of Bihar Assembly elections in 2015 reached a whopping 300 crores as per the official estimates. Gujarat Assembly polls in 2017 are likely to cost 240 crores to the public exchequer. Let me bring in Sanjay here. Sanjay, very impressive figures as far as expenditure is concerned. A hike of 300% and the difference of 3,000 crore between just two parliamentary elections. We're heading towards a huge expenditure in the next elections. And one argument which is given by the proponents of simultaneous elections is that that exercise will bring down this particular number very considerably. So is that not the most positive aspect to look at and start moving into that direction?
No, I won't disagree that this is the most positive aspect. If you actually hold simultaneous election, the expenses would come down. But there are very important things on which there are lots and lots of expenses, and this is a very important thing. See, I am not saying that I am against holding simultaneous elections, but the whole issue which we are not debated, is it feasible? How do you do it? So I would propose that instead of taking it forward to holding simultaneous election, we could actually move in the direction of synchronizing elections. You could have periods, like every year, this is the month when elections will take place, and you can actually club 6, 7, 8, 10 elections being held during that time to be held in 1 month. But forcing it by law, that by law it is mandatory to hold elections for all state assembly elections and Lok Sabha elections, I don't think this is feasible, and this may not be desirable, because we also need to respect the that all kinds of diversity. Just to give you a small example, wedding on 2 different days, wedding takes place in the among the 2 neighboring neighbors. Both the wedding costs so much of amount, it creates lots of chaos on the traffic. Can we not have a law then forcing all the people living in locality to have wedding on 1 day? Are we moving in that direction? Because
quite a tough simile, I must say, which you put in. Let me bring in Chakshu on that. Chakshu, apart from the similes which Sanjay is pointing out, if you look at the figures of the expenditure, which I'm saying, and this is a very, very important point, because as Mr. Suresh was also pointing out in his initial remarks, that this might put an end, or rather put a curb on the political corruption, because these are the government figures. We've not yet spoken about the money which is being spent by the political parties. So is this not the biggest ever reason to look at it the way it can be done? As Sanjay is pointing out, we can find out ways.
Vishal, I think we are, as a deliberative democracy, we should go into the details and discuss everything threadbare. I think money is an important point, but see, I have my reservations on some bit of the arguments. So let's take the money argument, for example. Now, over the years, the Election Commission has pointed out as to this is the ceiling on what candidates can spend, right? Never have I heard of a candidate, exceeding those ceilings, but I've always heard about the fact that there is political corruption, right? So, I think laws are great instruments. It is just that when the laws are not synchronized, with the way the reality of the country is, they may not yield the desired outcome. Now, I keep referring back to the parliamentary committee report, because that's what I work on. The parliamentary committee report says it consulted a number of political parties. A number of those said, yes, it is possible. Can we figure out means? Some of them said, we are agreed to the position of these elections, but is it feasible in India? We are not too sure. So there are parallel debates that need to happen on different tracks. Now, for example, let's take Rajya Sabha. Now, Rajya Sabha members are elected by state legislators, right? And 2/3 of the members retire. Now, and the idea for Rajya Sabha, in our constitutional framework was that it was supposed to be the house of reason. So, if a popularly elected house does something, there's a house of reason which debates it. Now, if elections are held simultaneously, will it impact that design of
composition
Rajya,
of
that
the
design
upper
of Rajya Sabha? So that should be a separate debate as to how do you ensure that whether it is simultaneous elections or synchronized elections, we can keep the nature of Rajya Sabha protected, right? Or similarly, some people say, is our electorate wise enough to distinguish between a local issue at the state level and a national issue when they are voting?
Okay.
Because there might be a possibility. My mother, is 65 years old or 66 years old. She goes to the booth and she's asked to cast 2 ballots. And, if she does not differentiate between the two, then, and she presses the same thing, bhai, I'll only press this for both of them, then it will have very different outcomes for, for the election.
Yes.
So, voter education.
Okay.
Right? So
those are
education.
definitely fine in details.
On
yes,
that, I don't think we need to debate too much. You just put all the data for all the state assembly elections and the Lok Sabha elections which have been held either simultaneously or within a period of 6 months. And you look at the success rate of the party which actually won the Lok Sabha elections and the same party winning the state assembly election, which is roughly 80% times. But if the elections are held at a distance, then it goes down to 40%.
Okay, let me bring in
clear data for that.
Let me bring in Mr. KG Suresh on this. What Chakshu was pointing out, again coming back to the money and the political corruption point of view. Then everything boils back again to the political willpower, because as Chakshu was pointing out, the political parties, it seems, will have to work on their internal organization first, work according to what the limits and rules are, and then bring in a political consensus and then move forward.
No, absolutely no doubt about it that a lot depends on the political will. But the issue is that suppose I have an election today. So, okay, I spent beyond the ceiling, right? But then I will be doing that only after 5 years. Whereas another election takes place in my state. Again, I spend that kind in 6 months. Then again, I am going to do the same thing. At least in one election, the amount of money spent would certainly, reduce to a great extent. There is absolutely no doubt. And when your expenses are reduced, even, you look at the past history of this country. Political parties which claimed to be so transparent, you have seen it. They said that they were different, and they, in terms of funding, they are very transparent. You have seen, their compulsion because they have to fight in other states beyond the state of their origin. So they had to look for, the what I would call not the so fair means. They had to, because they know that they have to fight elections. So this is a big, till the time we, come around, veer around the idea of state funding of elections and stuff like that, which I think that is right now, certainly we are not going to do that in the immediate future. But till then, certainly we have to curb the expenses, the amount of, and that also is going to reduce corruption. But I would also like to hear, just to respond to a, question that was raised here. See, I think that we should believe in the maturity of the people of this country. I mean, at a time when there was hardly any electronic media, at that time we have seen, say, post-emergency, how the people voted. There was no electronic media or social media except the state television. But in spite of that, they were, the people, how they voted. So I think the people are mature enough. In Delhi, you have seen, the people of Delhi gave all the Lok Sabha seats to a particular party. But when it came to the, Delhi assembly election, the same electorate, gave a totally different mandate. So I think that the people, let us not underestimate the people.
Okay, Mr. Suresh, to conclude the entire discussion, let me begin with you. What is the way forward then from here onwards?
I think it's certainly not a bad idea to discuss it, sit across with an open mind. I am sure that there are, yes, questions about the longevity of the governments, about what happens if there is an instability, what happens if there is a defection, what happens if the government of the state government falls. Yes, there are issues which need to be addressed. But for that, we should all sit across and discuss it. This is not, this should not be rejected as an idea. This is an idea which needs to be discussed threadbare.
Discussed threadbare. Mr. Sanjay, what's your viewpoint? How can we take it forward?
No, I agree that this idea should not be rejected at one go. But I think it should not be forced by law that all state and Lok Sabha elections must be held, on one day. I would rather argue for synchronizing elections because at times we have seen elections being held at an interval of 8 months, 10 months time. Synchronize these elections to be held in such a way that all the elections which are to be held in the month of 6-8 months. So you put all those states together and hold synchronized elections.
Okay, final comments from you, Chakshu.
Vishal, I think it's wonderful that every time I come on to Rajya Sabha TV, I'm always on a panel where the panel agrees. So I completely agree with Suresh when he says that, let's discuss this. And, incidentally, Suresh also very beautifully laid down the different aspects of the discussion. The simultaneous or synchronous elections, it's not a single topic. It will have cascading effects on multiple things. So I think groups of people, political parties, experts like Sanjay should need to sit down and discuss each of those aspects and say as to how can they be interlinked together.
Okay, so clearly what you're saying is that we can have as much detailed and threadbare debate as we had for the last 25 minutes on the issue of simultaneous elections in the country. It is an issue worth debating, worth discussing to find out the merits, demerits and the way forward, the easiest way in which it can be done to derive the maximum benefit out of it. We'll come back next week with all the details of the political happenings throughout that particular week. Till then, keep watching Rajya Sabha television.